Good evening. We're going to call this meeting to order, this workshop on the wastewater on 236. Can we get a roll call, please?
Mayor Grunder,
Here?
Vice Mayor Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Whites,
Here.
Commissioner Bloodsworth,
Here.
Commissioner Howell.
Here.
All right. I'll give the invocation, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Father God, thank you for bringing us here together tonight for another, what we hope to be productive meeting in the city of High Springs. I pray that you look after everyone who is affected by the weather and all our first responders and all the people that are here working for this city to make it what it is, which is such a great city. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Straight into business items. I like it. We're going to discuss the County Road 236 wastewater extension / septic tank phase-out project.
So, Mr. Mayor, we have your consultants from Midtower that's here to present some of the details about the project and answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Greg Lang with the engineering firm Midtower.
John Petrovich.
And Mr. Mayor, with your permission, we thought we'd give a little bit of a background and history and then, of course, try to answer any questions you have. But we realized recently that this project, because it was brought to you all and brought to us by a previous administration in 2021, believe it or not, and it was funded. And in recent years, a lot has changed for the city of High Springs and many other cities in North Florida. And in front of you, you have some information about that. So with your permission, we'll touch on that information very high level, very quickly as to how the city came to have these requirements regarding septics and hooking up to sewer, and touch on advanced waste treatment, which is happening out at your plant. And then we can get specifically into the project.
Absolutely, sir.
All right,
Please.
thank you, sir. John, you want to hit that?
Sure. So, good evening, Commission. So, firstly, you'll see on the first block there on the handout and also on the screen, this basically describes what a basin management action plan is. And these are basically geographical areas throughout the state where it basically it is a plan. It's an action plan that calls out different actions and milestones, nutrient reduction milestones for all the communities that are within these basin management action plans. Again, they follow geographical boundaries, and these are areas where water bodies and the aquifer are more vulnerable and can be impaired by nutrients that are in our wastewater and agriculture. And High Springs is within the Santa Fe River BMAP. And then within that, you'll see the second block. This is called a priority focus area. And these are areas that are even exceedingly more vulnerable because they contribute to spring flows. High Springs and the project area is also within a priority focus area, so it's an even more narrowed down group.
And let me interrupt.
Yes,
a
sir.
second. On the screen and in front of you, Commissioners, is the green, blue, and orangish color are these priority focus areas. There's a lot going on this map. You know, this is a DEP map, and then those outlines of purple, magenta, whatever that color is, the odd outlines, that's the spring shed. So within what the hydrogeologists and the experts, not us, figured out is that these are the most critical areas within the Basin Management Action Plan. And they have to do with where these springs are being recharged, and within those priority focus areas is where the greatest effect, good and bad, can happen to the springs.
Yes. So as you can see, the County Road 236 project is within the priority focus area. And then down on the bottom block, this is so the BMAP calls out specific nutrient reduction milestones for each community, and that is per the BMAP document. You can see there's 2028 milestone coming up, and each year, as your consultants, we do it on the city's behalf and alongside city staff. We add projects to the BMAP project portal, and it's a way for the legislature and DEP and the Water Management District and all stakeholders and entities involved to know what projects are either planned or underway to meet these nutrient reduction milestones that have been called out. So the infiltrative wetlands and the plant expansion that's underway, the County Road 236 project is another example. They all contribute towards these milestones that will ultimately eliminate total nitrogen, which creates algae blooms. It kills flora and fauna. Too much of that is not good for the water. So this is, go ahead, Greg, if you something you want to speak on.
Yeah, and I'm not a springs expert by any stretch, but what led to the BMAPs, I think is important for us to hear at a high level, is for years leading up to the BMAP legislation, the water management districts and DEP were learning about the springs and studying the springs. And I can speak as a layperson or engineering person, but not as a springs expert, that when my kids were born around 35 years ago and I'd take them to these springs, my hometown is Cedar Key, and they'd swim in the brackish water there and they'd say, "Can't we go to the springs?" They thought the springs were great. So the flow was greater and there was less algae. So what I think the experts learned is that things are affecting the springs in a negative way, and those things are mostly nitrogen, and the sources of nitrogen in urban areas is septics, and then in the rural areas it's mostly agriculture. So hence the BMAP legislation. Senator Charlie Dean is long retired now, but he championed the Springs and Aquifer Protection Act. I think that was in 2016-ish. And I had the pleasure to have lunch with him one day, and he said, he was a farmer from Central Florida, and he goes, when my dad was, when I was a kid, my dad would say, "Take the trash out." So we'd throw the trash in the pickup truck, back it up to a sinkhole and throw it in there. Because he says, now I realize that these springs and these sinkholes, as the way he put it, were the eyes of Mother Earth or something like that. He was really taken by what he learned from DEP and the water management districts about the value of the springs. Then, fast forward, also some studies were done about the economic value. And so we learned a lot that here in our beautiful part of Florida, I think the most beautiful part, people come to see and enjoy the water. They come to my area in Cedar Key to go fishing and look at birds and things. And they come here because you have some of, if not, I'm biased, I think you have the finest springs in all of Florida. And that contributes mightily to the economic value of High Springs and the region. So that's how we got to where we are. And then Senator Dean and others since then, the legislature, and now Governor DeSantis has encouraged and helped the legislature put more funding towards meeting these goals.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we'll go on to the next page on the back. Excuse me.
Let's see.
Oh.
Oh, I just shut it off, but that's okay. I got a technical support guy right over here.
We just press the arrow.
There we go.
There we go. So this is the area where I think it would be more conversational. We want to hear from you. And but this ultimately spells out the legislative framework of House Bill 1379. It touches on a number of things regarding wastewater and BMAPs, but specifically it also talks about the septic system mandates that are now in place. And ultimately what it does, it's nuanced a bit, but ultimately prohibits the installation of new septic tanks where connection to a sewer system is available, and especially on acres of lots of 1 acre or less, you can only install what's called an enhanced nutrient-reducing septic system if sewer connection is unavailable. So, and this is state mandate. It's coming down.
John, let me, Mayor and Commissioner, this was passed in the 2023 session. So
Yes.
it's a very new law that has taken effect. And
took effect January 1st, 2024.
yeah, so it kind of actually took some of us a little bit by surprise because we didn't know this was coming until it was talked about in the legislature, because we knew in the priority focus areas the septic provisions were there, but now it applies to the whole BMAP.
Yeah.
This project area is within a priority focus area though, so this new legislation really didn't change anything for it.
Yeah. So as you can see in the map, this is a good illustration. So it's the same priority focus areas in Spring Shed and B map, but those tiny black dots, which is just riddled throughout, are septic systems that DEP has been able to identify. So it's a reason it's a great effort that that benefits the environment is that older septic systems ultimately do leach nutrients into the water or into the ground that ultimately makes its way to our groundwater and the springs, and so that's part of the key push. It's one of the options that a community has, and that the state is really pushing heavily behind and offering funding for, specifically if you're in a B map, is to eliminate those septics.
And Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, that's why the city has achieved so much 100% grant funds for a project like this, because you're mandated to do it, and so I think it's only right that the state help pay for it, and that's what the state has done here. Now, what's unique about this septic project is the County Road 236 project, is it also, the state used some of their ARPA money. So we all know about ARPA money. The city received from ARPA money, counties received it. The state also received it, and the state has committed a certain amount of their federal ARPA money to this project, which has to be expended by 2026, or it goes back to the U.S. Treasury. And then last point I'll make about the background, High Springs has been more of a recipient in the last, say, 10, 12 years of grant funds for these water quality efforts than I know of any other city in North Florida, and you guys have done an exceptional job utilizing them, and I commend you for that. And what my concern is that if you don't move this project forward, then DEP and Water Management District may look at that and say, well, they're not so interested anymore in being a partner with this effort. And then when you apply for other grant funds for other projects in the future, I would be concerned that you might not be as competitive as other communities, because all this funding is competitive. Not every community achieves the funding. And finally, the project that's wrapping up out at your wastewater plant, which is taking that effluent from your plant and turning it into advanced waste treatment grade effluent through the wetlands, also provides recharge to the Springs Shed, which is also important to the quantity part of this equation. So it's not just quality, it's quantity. And in that application for funding, this county road, this small project, was referenced in there. So it's kind of, I think the city, not you all, it was, like I said, previous administration, set up an expectation with the funding agencies that this project would be completed along with the wastewater plant project. So that's the background. We're ready to try to answer any questions and talk about the specific project if you choose, Mr. Mayor. But thank you for your time. We hope this was understandable. Some of this is pretty complicated.
Oh, thank you for sure for coming, and believe me, I think there are going to be a lot of questions.
Okay.
Do we have any commissioner questions? I want to open it up.
Yes. I don't know how this grant's working, so maybe, Mr. Marsh, you can tap in on here as well. The funding that is being provided is paying for the system to be put in the ground. How about far as replacing what we tear up or whatever? Is that going to be back to exactly how it was and better than what it was when these folks went in there?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, sir. These grants allow for the restoration of roads, driveways, whatever is affected, yards, not better, but to the grade that it was. So, for example, if you have a lime rock driveway and you needed a line to go through it or under it, it would be restored to lime rock. If it was concrete, restored to concrete, but not better. And these projects get videoed before the project starts by the contractor, so that if anybody says, hey, I had this beautiful paver driveway and, the contractor damaged it, then the contractor would have to put it back. But if it wasn't there to start with, it goes back to where it was.
I guess my terminology of better is when you go to patch a drive or a road, it settles. You come in and put new asphalt, it settles, it drops down. Then you've created another divot in the
Yeah.
pavement. So what I'm getting at is it settles and falls, are they gonna be responsible to repair that and at least make it even where the settle is done and it's gonna stay even with the existing pavement that is there?
Excellent, Mr. Mayor, if I can. Yes, sir. So in the plans and specifications, roads have to be restored to the standard that the road is, if it's a DOT road, a county road, local road. And if the contractor doesn't restore it to the properly, and if it settles, it wasn't restored properly, then he will be liable to go back and fix that. Matter of fact, we have a project in Central Florida right now where the contractor didn't restore the road properly, and he's, as of yesterday, starting to dig it back up and do it again. Yes, sir.
Because I think that's some of the concerns from a lot of residents.
Absolutely.
Is my yard going to be tore up? Is my road that the city has provided for me going to be put back how it was so there's no disturbance in either one of those factors?
Mr. Mayor, if I may please, piggybacking onto that question from Commissioner Bloodsworth, would they not be using directional boring if they're going under roads or under driveways?
Excellent question. Sometimes directional drilling or boring is exactly what's done, not unless, so driveways usually no, Madam Commissioner, because driveways can easily be restored. And typically directional drilling, not typically, it is a much more expensive methodology, right? It's a great methodology. We do it all the time. And it's, I don't know, and I didn't review the plans, I'm not the design engineer on this, I don't think there's directional drilling on this project. But it's used very commonly when the budget allows, and if it's the right choice for the project. Yep.
Can I,
Please, keep going.
do you mind if I'll just go through my list. Since none of us were sitting up here when
Right.
the genesis of this project, was the original grant amount $1.8 million?
I believe that's correct. And then additional funding was sought for another, how much?
No, the original amount,
Oh, that's right, it was less than that.
yes, it was less than that. What was the original amount?
And if I remember correctly,
There was, I believe it was around 800,000, and there was 50% city match
Right.
included.
Right, I
Yes,
remember there being a
so-
$400,000 match we
Yeah,
couldn't
so
make.
working with, throughout the design process and as the project advanced, DEP waived the match.
Mm-hmm.
And then last fiscal year in 2023, I believe it was 23, 24, I actually worked on the grant application. We had to, the project was put out for bid, and there was a funding shortfall, and we went and secured an additional 1.1 million at that point. So the total now is about 1.9 million. But
1.9, okay. And in terms of the materials cost from 4 years ago, COVID's in the mix of that.
Yes.
Stick of pipe is not the same as it was 4 years ago.
No.
How do we know that we're going to be able to pay for this?
right, good question, Mr. Mayor. So this project has been bid, of course, not awarded, because if I know, I think I understand correctly, you as a commission decided not to go forward with the award. But the contractor, the low bid contractor, is in place. He's been told not to go forward, obviously. And his price is, the protection to the city is the bonds, both payment and performance bonds. And so he has provided his price. He has to hold to it. And as far as we know, he's willing to do that. Contractors sometimes will say, we'll hold it for 60 days or 2 months. This is.
Has he been holding it for that long?
He's been holding.
He
it for
has
some
been
time.
holding it, which is unusual, but it's not, this is a large project to all of us, but it's not that large a project to him, it's not that complex a project to the contractor apparently, and he is holding it. Now, he hasn't received a notice to proceed, obviously, so, we'd have to find out for sure, and that would happen if the city decided to let him proceed.
And then this just comes back from my own experience in terms of doing all kinds of this kind of stuff. What happens if he's awarded the bid and it's been a four-year held cost, which is unheard of, and then he submits a change order. Sorry, I've got a 40% change order. Then what do we do?
So first, he hasn't held his price for the 4 years. It just
Okay,
went
so
out
it's
to
not that
bid,
long.
you know,
Okay.
when it went out to bid.
Okay.
And because we realized, and the city realized there was going to be a shortfall, that's when we sought the additional funding. So we believe the project is fully funded. And what we have seen in the last, I'm not sure if it's 6 months or the last 9 months, is somewhat of a stabilization of prices. That could change. But Madam Commissioner, she's exactly right. We've seen escalation of prices, and you have too as a city. But in infrastructure, it's been higher than, you know, we're all, during COVID, we were used to 20, 30% in different things. We've seen 50 to 100% in infrastructure costs, and hence why we sought additional funding. So if the contractor still agrees to hold his price, we're confident, and he's confident he can do the project for that, and there is additional money to do that, and there would be bonds. So to answer your specific question, let's say he changes his mind and says, hey, something happened here, pipe spiked again, or diesel fuel or something, and we want this large change order. So he has to justify a change order, and we see nothing that would justify it, so we would make a recommendation, if we saw nothing to justify it, make a recommendation to not move forward with the project, not award the project. The city's made it very clear over a long time that, you know, they do not want to put funds into this project, and we know you have a lot of funding priorities. So I think that we would have a very important sit down with the contractor to make sure his estimate and his bid is still accurate before we made the recommendation. Well, we have made that recommendation to award it, but before it was formally awarded to him and given a notice to proceed. And it's, again, in the big scheme of things, it's not that large a project, so I don't see that as a problem.
I don't remember seeing these bids. Maybe they were tabulated and I don't recall. How many people responded to the bid?
It was, one bid was received in 2023.
Yeah.
So there's only one person who
Yeah,
submitted a bid.
and that unfortunately, or I don't know, I'm not sure it was unfortunate, wasn't uncommon, and still
It
is
still
not
isn't. Yeah.
uncommon.
Yeah. Right.
Contractors are very busy all over
Yeah.
Florida. There's, part of it is the ARPA money that came through, part of it is the bipartisan infrastructure law, the federal legislation, and so we're happy if we get one good qualified contractor and we review the bid, which we did, and thinks that it's a legitimate, we know it's a legitimate, accurate bid. Now, having said that, it's still a higher bid than we would have expected pre-COVID, and we hope prices may further stabilize, but I'm not going to predict they're going to come down maybe at all in the foreseeable future.
Do you have a rough number of what his bid amount was? Of the
Yes, ma'am.
1.9 million total?
Yep. His bid was $1,655,990.30.
1.66.
So the bid was, you know, just over $1 million over the construction budget. So that's why we were tasked to go and seek conditional funding. So and we were successful at that.
So then the engineering cost for this particular project would be about $200,000?
That sounds correct.
The project is designed. I don't remember the total
Yeah, the
at
project's
that point,
designed.
but right now it's just our services during construction to make sure we have a resident project representative on site. He's building the project to our plans and specifications and reporting back to us.
And also doing the construction monitoring, as John said, but also the monthly construction meetings, and also reviewing the pay applications and preparing those applications for the city, as we've done for years now, and making sure they're accurate for the city's review, and then making that cycle between the city, the funding agency, back to the city, and then a check can be issued to the contractor.
Yes.
And does this, I haven't seen any kind of drawings for this particular project, so I don't understand how this particular project area ties into the overall wastewater system in the entire city. Is this an enclave? Is this little spot an enclave, or is this looping the system somehow, or? I'm just trying to figure out why this
Yeah.
particular location, other than the B map, I get that part.
Yeah.
But why, what's, because I haven't seen a pipe map. I don't know, do we even have a pipe map that's comprehensive for water and wastewater lines in the city? I don't know.
So excellent question. Mr. Mayor, I don't think we have all the answers to that. This was a different administration. I don't know if that was chosen because it could be reached for the funds at that time. And this is an extension of your existing system, period. And as you know, over the years, the city has conducted a number of septic to sewer projects, including Camp Kalakwa and others. I'm going back quite a few years now by memory. And sometimes they're chosen not because sometimes they're chosen because they can be chosen. You have areas in the city that would be very difficult to sewer. And as you know, you have a lot of grinder pumps, which we're never a fan of, and we don't design grinder pumps systems. But some of those to remediate would be very, very expensive. This was plausible, and someone in the city wanted to go forward with this project and at that time, and I don't know the background for that.
Is there another lift station included in this project?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Would we be able to, because this is just a workshop, we're not voting on anything.
Right.
Before this went for a vote, would we be able to look at engineering plans for the project and how it ties into the system overall?
Oh, absolutely. And you have plans here in City Hall, wherever those at, and we certainly can send some more, send PDFs. And here's here's actually the bid tab, which shows the pump station and things. So there's all the unit prices, not to, bore you to tears with those, but that's the actual contractor's cost. And yes, and so we will, Mr. Mayor, with your permission, we'll communicate tomorrow with the city manager and make sure you have plans and specs to.
Please.
All right, so I was just curious to know what was the notice that we send out to the citizens, because I got a phone call literally about 30 minutes before this meeting started, and the notice that was sent out to them, they thought that they don't have to pay absolutely nothing, which we know that is untrue. So I would love to see a copy of the notice that was sent out, because the verbiage must be incorrect in how they interpret what was sent out to them. So do we have a copy of the verbiage that was sent out?
Mr. Mayor, we don't have a copy of that, but let me address the cost, because this is,
David, will you bring it up?
the cost question is a really important question, and we know that the city is going to grapple or is grappling with that. So when these septic to sewer projects are awarded, the cities that we've worked in before and work in now take a couple different tracks. Some that have impact fees just don't utilize them. They say a grant is paying for this project, we're not going to charge the citizens an impact fee. We're not saying that's the right or wrong way to do it, we're saying that's the most common. Now, and if you charge your impact fee, whatever that fee is, we see some cities say to a property owner, you have X number of years to pay that at no interest, and you can obviously decide what that looks like. But most cases we see they just waive the impact fee, which is a really interesting question, and that's one for your legal counsel to weigh in on. But you know, what's interesting in High Springs is impact fees are typically collected for expanding the system, which this is an expansion, or adding capacity to the system. And what's really interesting with High Springs is you're usually utilizing 100% grant to add capacity to your wastewater plant, and it's 100% grant to expand it. So again, I'm going to leave that to if you choose to ask city attorney what they think about that. But that's what we see most communities do, is just waive them.
Okay, so this is probably not a question for them, then you're probably going to be on the hook for this one. So there's 20 homes that's affected by this project. 7 of the homes could be forced to connect due to our ordinance because of how close they are. If they were forced without the grant, they would have to pay like $10,000 plus impact fees.
300? 2120.
2120. What is the fee they would have to pay with the grant? So I'm talking about without the grant. So if they were forced, if the 7 homes, that's
2120. Same amount.
okay. And then with the grant,
Same amount.
We would hook up for them?
What's that?
You would hook up for them? You would pay all the hookup charges and everything?
No.
Mr. Mayor, the
No,
grant would pay.
I'm
No, I
trying
know
to
that
tell
he's
you.
asking, what he's asking is,
Without this grant, how much would the citizens have to pay? It's gonna be about
May I?
10,000 plus impact fees.
I requested information from Diane, and she sent it to me. It's $2,120, I believe. Let me pull my email.
That's what I'm saying. That's the fee they're paying
But-
with the grant, correct?
But it will be broke up for 36 months.
That's not what I'm asking.
he's asking. I know.
There's a
Different
there's an
under the
impact
two
fee
scenarios.
and there's a connection fee. That's what we're talking about. The grant, from what I understood, was the grant was going to cover the connection fee, which
Yes.
is the larger amount, if I recall.
So-
And then the impact fee was the $2,100. But as you, like you were saying, Vice Mayor, I believe total, if we didn't go through with this grant, would be somewhere in the like $12,000 total.
Yeah,
'Cause it's
that's
the
what it's
impact
gonna be.
fee.
So I don't know why
Yeah.
we're saying no.
Mr.
That's what it's
Mr. Mayor, if I could add to that discussion, it's a really important discussion.
I think that needs to be explained. Hold on one second.
Yeah,
That needs
sure.
to be explained better, because I agree with you. And
Yeah, I'm
that's
trying to
what we've
ask,
heard.
and I don't know why.
That's what we've heard in the past and what we've been told, and that's been the history of it, is when you have to hook up and nobody pays for it but you, it's a $10,000 hookup plus to get done everything that needs to be done,
I've
plus
not
the
heard
impact fees. And I think that's what Vice Mayor
I would
Miller is getting at.
defer to our building official too. My understanding is that's new construction. So if you have new construction and you're adding on to the system and a developer or contractor is connecting for a new development, then those connections would be paid for. In this type of circumstance, it's unique. It's not the same thing as adding new development. Is that correct, Alan?
The best of my knowledge, we charge $2,120. We charge 200 and something an order. And I believe what you're hearing is grinder pump numbers. That's for a
Yeah,
tank.
that's what I was getting.
Was that 10,000 before?
That's
I heard whenever they, okay, if they did grinder pump
You
sewer,
would need to clarify with Public Works, but I believe what you're talking about is grinder pump numbers.
when we did the initial sewer hookup before,
Yes,
because
you
everybody
have
went to
pay
grinders.
The basin,
Well, that's what our system
the
was set
grinder
up
pump,
as.
the pipe to get to the house.
So I know other citizens, whenever we started doing a sewer system, were paying the 10,000 plus. And this is the gravity fed.
And Mr. Mayor, the
This-
cost to connect to a home that has an existing septic to available sewer really varies if it's not paid for by the grant. And it has to do with the distance from the tie-in to the sewer system and where the septic is. Sometimes it's pretty close, sometimes it's pretty far. It has to do with the, the restoration that needs to happen, and of course, the tank has to be pumped out and collapsed and filled and so forth. So it really does vary. But in this case, those costs are paid for by the grant.
The only, to my, best of my knowledge, the only thing that's not covered by the grant is the impact fees, which are $2,120. If you decide to move forward with this project, you can we have a few options. One, make them pay $2,120 to connect. We can do it over 3 years, is what I proposed the first time. We do a 3-year payment plan. Or as a commission, unless legal says something different, you have the ability, because this is all grant funded, to waive the impact fee. If you waive the impact fee, it's no cost to the citizen. There's two ways I look at it. One, I don't like waiving the impact fee because every time there's a project ahead, you're gonna, well, you did it for this person, you gotta do it for this person, you gotta be consistent and fair. However, as we were told tonight, is the impact fee is to expand the system or create capacity. That's what we're doing. We're collecting impact fees, so when we have to expand the wastewater, we have money to put down on the project. Since this is all grant funded, the capacity and the expansion are all covered under the grant. So reasonably, the impact fee is a moot point. It's whether you want to charge it or not, but as far as the actual impact fee, having an impact on capacity or expansion, that's all covered by the grant.
Could I just add, we did charge impact fees to Southside Terrace when they had a similar project. I don't know anything about the project. I just know that we checked and they did have to pay the $2,120. That was all they paid, though. They didn't have any additional fees beyond that, other than regular service fees.
Mr. Mayor, I'm coming in on the tail end of this conversation, but my general knowledge of impact fees would lead me to recommend that you definitely involve Mr. Walker and Ms. Adams in the conversation regarding the impact fees, because from what I'm hearing, I don't know that there's actually a legal basis to charge a true impact fee, because the impact, as has been pointed out, has been absorbed by the grant funds. Now, if there's new construction later that wants to come along and attach, they're creating new impact. And that would appropriately be charged if it's new construction, after the system is put in. But the impact that these homes that are pre-existing homes that are being connected to the system being put in, their impact is being covered by the grant. So I don't know if there is a legal basis to actually charge that additional fee or not, and I think that's what Mr. Marshall has touched on as well. I would defer to your routine legal advisors who have been involved in this conversation for several years to really give you a definitive answer on that before you, from a financial perspective, counted on those funds.
Right.
So,
Thank you. Do we want to hear from the citizens?
Can I ask one more quick question before we
Absolutely.
open it up, please? In terms of these total nitrogen pounds per year reduction goals for the High Springs Santa Fe BMAP, do we know what I'm assuming when it says 100%, does that mean that we've got 6,200 pounds per year on average total nitrogen loading at the spray field?
I don't believe so, Madam Commissioner. These are milestones set by DEP and Water Management District for the BMAP.
Okay.
We could tell you, I don't have that information tonight, but we could tell you the extent of your nitrogen reduction at the expanded and the wetlands treatment process.
Yeah, I mean, the theory certainly is with the design of the infiltrated wetlands, our nitrogen reduction is going to be quite a bit more.
It's dramatic, yes.
We don't have an AWT plant, which I would have loved we could have afforded it, but we couldn't.
Right.
But if we're discharged into the infiltrated wetlands, we are going to be achieving great reduction in terms of total nitrogen just doing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mr. Mayor, yes, that is an excellent point, and that's a whole nother discussion, but I'd like to briefly touch on High Springs is also required to meet AWT, Advanced Waste Treatment,
Right.
Effluent Disposal. And so when we look carefully at how to do that, we also would love to see, and one day you will have an AWT plant, but we said, okay, your secondary treatment plant, once the effluent goes through, which is run very well by your staff, by the way, once it goes through the treatment part of the wetlands, it will get below, it'll meet and exceed the 3 milligrams per liter.
Right.
That's the goal, that's the law.
Right.
And then, once it's polished through the treatment wetlands, it'll go into the infiltrative wetlands and recharge the aquifer. So you will be meeting AWT as soon as that comes online, which is here shortly.
But we're not meeting AWT as it leaves the plant.
No, you're not.
It still has to have additional treatment before.
Yes, and that's the wetlands.
Right.
And that was the benefit and the cost savings to use the wetlands. It's a great process, and you're exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, you mind?
I don't mind at all.
Couple of questions. You mentioned Camp Coakla earlier. If I remember correctly, does anybody know there is a sewer line running by there now that goes in the back way to Camp Coakla? I see David's got a thumb up. With that being said, that is the line we will be tapping into to feed or to supply these homes with sewer? Is that same line?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not positive. I'd have to look at the plans and specs. If that is the closest point of connection, it likely would be.
Okay.
Because, you always want to go to the closest point of connection. But I'm not positive. I don't want to say for sure until.
Right. I was just curious if that would be.
Right.
That would definitely save cost, obviously. I don't know how far our sewer line goes to that point since we're touching on these two roads, but.
And Mr. Mayor, the Commissioner touched on a really important point, that's typically how you expand a system and take septics offline, is you do a project like Camp Coakla where they had a package plant that wasn't meeting the nutrient criteria, that was decommissioned, park is now served, and then you say, well, what's nearby that can be connected? And that's typically the methodology.
And then, since y'all are in this line of work and all this stuff, is there any future that these small communities like High Springs and Lotchway and other communities in the state as a whole are going to be mandated to get off of septic tanks in a tight-knit area in the future to do away with the dumping of the sewage through septic tanks. Now, I know outside, you know, in the country and rural, it's just not feasible to have a septic system or sewer system because you just can't afford to build that.
Right.
It's not feasible for the state nor the residents.
Right.
But in a tight-knit like the small communities, do you see that coming on board in the future?
Yes, sir. Actually, it came on board, if you're in a priority focus area, it came on board with House Bill 1379, which was signed by the governor in 2023. And so if you're within one of those basin management action plan areas, and the whole city is, and your lot is 1 acre or smaller, then you have a choice. If sewer's available, you hook up. If it's not available, then you have to put in what we call an advanced treatment septic that meets a higher level of treatment. So that now is the law in that entire basin management action plan area.
And that is active right now if somebody is building a home from today or January
1 acre
1st.
or less.
Yeah.
And within the BMAP, but the whole city is. And that's probably why High Springs is seeing so much interest by developers. First, the interest is because you're a wonderful community, but they're wanting to hook up to your system if at all possible. And
Any idea of a guesstimate of how much that system would cost a residents of putting that type of system in?
so we don't do advanced septic systems. There are obviously companies that put those in. I've heard numbers from 15 to over 30,000 for those systems. And of course, it depends on the size. So if you're a 3-bedroom house or a 2-bedroom house, you get different size systems. And there is some monitoring that goes with that and some reporting. I don't know what that cost is. And it does use a little bit of energy because I think there's some aeration that happens, so there's some electricity going to the system.
With that being said, to me, that's going to take years for a resident that's on city sewer to have to pay that kind of money.
Right.
I mean, I guess you would say, depending on what their water usage is and their sewer,
Right.
if it was $1,000 a year, I guess that'd be, if it was a $30,000 system, 30,000 or 30 years. But I was talking to some citizens today. I called and spoke to them. Most of them are on board with it because they know it's coming sooner or later. Most of them say, hey, my septic system's 20 years old. I'm already having drain problems.
Right.
I know I'm going to have to do something with that. I mean, and then I've had one say they're not on board with it, but they know it's coming, and if it comes, it comes.
Commissioner Glover, Mr. Mayor brought up an excellent point. Right now, if you have an existing septic, you're in compliance. You had it permitted through the Department of Health, maybe it was 20 years ago, and you've never needed by law to have it inspected. So you don't really necessarily know whether it's functioning all that well or not. And back 20 years ago, septic tanks were smaller than they are now, and the drain fields were often put in closer to groundwater table. And of course, we've got a lot of lime rock or karst all through this beautiful area. So most folks, if their toilet flushes, they think everything's working, but it may not be working all that well. It may be contributing nitrogen to the groundwater, but they don't know, and the state doesn't know. But the law now is there for the entire city, lots, acre or less, enhanced septic or sewer connection.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I want to open it up now for citizen comments and questions. Please come to the podium, state your name, and I believe you get 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Patricia Grunder, and I live at 23371 Northwest 200th Lane in High Springs. In the spirit of disclosure, I should say that I am the mayor's mother.
Hey, Mama. You look beautiful this evening.
I'm here this evening, though, because I feel very strongly that this is a very important project for the region that we're talking about. I live on a street that has the newest house and my home is about 50 years old right now. And of course, all the homes on the street have a septic system. And although I think all of us would like to believe that we're being good stewards of our septic systems by having them checked every couple of years, having them pumped, of course, when necessary, the bottom line is septic systems tend to get the most attention when they fail. And as was mentioned by the presenters a little earlier, there's so much that we don't know is happening in our groundwater area, and it's really critical. It is absolutely critical that we begin to do the best thing possible for our beautiful natural resources, for our water, for the future of our community. So I would hope that you would give this your most serious attention, and when the opportunity comes, vote positively for this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Scott Jameson. This will be short, 3 minutes, but also be short because Midtower and them made a lot of the points that I was going to make. One of the first and largest subdivisions to be developed when I was on the commission was Cinnamon Hills, and originally scheduled to include private septic tanks and disposal. But the state intervened, and they came in and they required that the sewage system be changed to a public sewer system. Well, why? What was the big deal? We're talking 14 years ago or so forth. Well, much of the area in High Springs in north central Florida is 20 to 25 feet above the aquifer. That's how close it is. So contamination, which has already been spoken about, it is a issue then and even more so now. We've got three, and I gave you guys on the deal the three ordinances that basically require or shall hook up. There really is no option within our ordinances that allows somebody, if you're within 200 feet, not to hook up. And so that's the one. The other one is the environment, which we've been talking about, and I'm glad that that came out on a big one because that is a huge issue. And I know there's environmental issues, but the one that is most important to me is the fact of having fresh water to be able to drink. And I don't want to make sure that we're doing something to go. With the understanding, here's a paper, Alachua County Today, 2004. High Springs Wastewater Project, Center of Talks. So when I got on, this was all happening, and we had to come up with a plan to set it up to gradually move away from the septic tanks and into a public sewer system, because we understood what was going on. So we put a plan in place that as it developed, we would do it. We probably had, I can't tell you how many people came in and says, I don't want to at the time. You go back there. But the issue was, if you read the ordinances and from the state, there really was no option. And so what we challenged our city manager at the time, and I know we mentioned grants and everything. When Mr. Booth was here, we got about $20 million specifically for this, because the state knew we were going to spend it. Give it to us, it's spent. And so I appreciate what everybody was, what they were saying on the deal. My only concern is, let's say you don't want to do this and you don't, and because for some reason we haven't moved forward on it, understand the city will still be responsible to hook up the 6 or 7 homes that are in that area. And you're going to have to blunt the cost, or the homeowners are going to have to, because the ordinance says the homeowner does, the city doesn't. So.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Dave Sutton, Family House, neighbor of the mayor's mother. 20 homes, is it just the 20 homes in the neighborhood there, or is this going to carry out to like Emery Vaughn's place, the grade roads?
22 homes in the area.
22 homes?
On those 3 roads.
And we don't know if it's going to tie into the Camp Colloquial line or not.
I believe it is, but the engineers are going to look at the drawing. If that's the closest connection, that will most
Yeah,
likely be
it
where
runs down the west side.
I believe that's where it's going to be connected, but I don't want to tell you something and be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's where it's gonna connect.
All right, another quick question. Is that line, do we know if it's big enough for future development out there? I know there's 75 acres within the city limits that could be within 10 years is developed.
Richard, you got any, say on that? Do you know about that line?
Kevin,
Kevin, will you pause that?
Yeah,
Thanks.
pause his time, please.
I wanna give him his time, yeah.
And the other thing is, I support this. The oldest septic tank I think going, it's our family home. It's 70 years old, and it's probably, like they said, small and like he described, in need of a new one. So please make a decision, and let's make a decision quickly. Let's don't kick the can on this.
So yes, right there, runs a 6-inch force main.
6-inch force main.
Right, no, I will.
Is that big enough, like for 75 acres worth of homes, of neighborhood, like big states or something?
No. No. Yeah.
I believe it would suffice for the area.
Good evening, everyone. I am Alicia Cottrell, and for disclosure, I am Tristan's neighbor. I am one of the homes that will be impacted by like the force upgrade, and I am aligned with this. I'm not really sure. So my question is, the vote that's being given, is it about whether or not you're doing it, which is a law, so you should be doing it, or is the vote about whether or not we're accepting the grant? What is the vote essentially about?
Tonight's just the workshop.
I mean, but like this workshop
It
is
would
to
be to take it
support.
and push it forward. I
So
believe.
there's not a vote tonight.
I understand.
It will probably be on the next agenda after this workshop. That's what I anticipate. The vote would be to accept the grant and move forward with the project. If the commission does not vote to move forward with the project or move forward by accepting the grant, the project won't move forward.
So I'm aligned with the project. And as far as the grant, if it's going to reduce the cost to me as a resident, I'm okay if I have to pay the impact fee. When I look at it from a financial perspective, I'd rather pay $2,100 in an impact fee versus $10,000, whether it be over 2 or 3 years. It just makes financial sense for me as a resident, especially when you look at things like over the years, property taxes are going to continue to go up. I don't know how some of y'all mortgages are looking, but these are just things that are going to happen throughout the couple of years. So I support the project, and I support if the grant is going to reduce the cost of me as a resident, I support having the grant. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's important to clarify that your monthly utility bill will go up. If you're paying just for water now, wastewater will increase that quite a bit. So the cost doesn't necessarily go down. I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
I think she meant all the other costs and whatnot
Right,
that
okay,
get cured
okay.
with all the other stuff.
Add that we spread that cost over 36 months, so it's about $59 a month for residents to pay that 2120 out over 3 years. So they don't have to come up with it all up front.
However, since this is not coming to a vote tonight, I will send an email to Mr. Walker and Ms. Adams to clarify if we can even charge an impact fee off of Clay's methodology, and my thought process is I don't think we can. It's not, the grant is covering the expansion and the capacity issue. And I agree with Clay that I don't think we can. I want to get a legal opinion on that before we move forward. If we can't collect a impact fee, unless I'm wrong, somebody can clear me, put me on notice, but if we do not do the impact fee, there should be no cost to the resident to connect. Yep. And before this closes, I wanted to kind of give my 2 cents on it. I've spoke to you on the one-on-ones, and I tried to get this message across the last time when we talked about this, and I don't think I did a good job. That's why we asked Midtower to come in and give you more details. I feel this is a very good project. It's not, 22 homes are not going to affect our capacity. to note any noteworthy impact. It's $1.9 million of free money, and we're going to talk about strategic plan later. But if you look at the strategic plan, which if you don't know what the strategic plan is, it's a 3 to 5 year plan, however you want to do it, that guides my priorities from you as a commission. If you look at the last strategic plan, which was done, I think 2021 or 2022, I don't remember. The number one thing that was on there was your wastewater. He's getting the wastewater treatment. And this is a project that meets what your strategic plan, which none of you voted on that strategic plan, but that was, at the time, the number one issue, why the grant was pursued. And this is to expand sewer, wastewater services to get people off the septic. And to Mr. Bloodsworth's point, we can't predict what the legislation's gonna be, but from looking at the last legislation and the one that was passed in 2023, that is the direction they're going. Septics are, in the city limits, are gonna go to the wayside. We're sitting on top of the aquifer, your water source is right there, and this is a good project. I just wanted, as a city manager, I wanted to really emphasize my opinion on it, even though it doesn't count that much. But this is a good project, and 1.9 million, that's tough to turn back.
Any other comments? Concerns? Commissioners, any other comments or concerns?
I've got one other question I'd like to direct
Absolutely.
to Richard, if that's possible. Richard, do we have any idea, is what David brought up about 6-inch versus 12-inch line? Do we know how far our 12-inch main would be from that location if it's just a 6 going to Camp Coahuila for future growth?
12 inches there, about Main Street going towards the main lift station or just after the main lift.
And where's that?
To the wastewater plant, so that's pretty well everything then on that way.
So anything north of Main Street, or, sorry, north of 441, is that 12-inch on that side of 441 at all?
No, that's 6 inches.
That's 6 inch on the whole way from 441 out by the school.
Yeah, through Coahuila and everything.
Okay.
So we do have a 6-inch that covers the whole way there for Weston Oaks and Oak Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
So both those lift stations for both those neighborhoods pumps through that 6-inch that goes, it flows into, towards a larger system and everything towards the main lift. So it should be.
It sounds like it's gonna work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for that over there, sounds like 6 is more than enough.
Yeah, yeah.
And might even do that 75 acre.
Well, I was just wondering if the
Depending on what they do
12-inch
with it.
was the required
Right.
size, so apparently
Yeah,
the
that was a
6 is
great
working
question.
really good.
That was a great question. I didn't even
Alright.
think of that. Okay. If nobody else has anything on that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the workshop.
So moved.
No, thank you guys very much.